Hi, friends. Thank you for listening in today. This is the audio version of Chapter 2 of Pieces of Purple, and in it we'll explore the adoptive culture. As usual, in 2 weeks, I'll release a videoed conversation with an adult MK in which we'll further discuss the topics covered in this chapter. The audio of that chat will appear here as a podcast episode too, but there's so much more life and nuance that come across in a video format, especially with this upcoming guest. To view the videos, follow the link to Pieces of Purple's YouTube channel in this episode's notes, and make sure you subscribe to it so you don't miss any of the upcoming fare. You'll also find links to my website, my contact information, and the book's Amazon page. Remember that the printed book contains poetry, discussion questions, and quotes from 50-some MKs that you will not hear in these recordings. And now, here's Pieces of Purple, Chapter 2, The Adoptive Culture. My parents were not surprised by my love for France and its enchanting collection of contradictions. I loved my adoptive culture's soaring flights of art and its solid grip on science, its reverence for beauty, and its fixation on fatalism. My sensitivity to words and history and aesthetic loveliness are evidence of its influence on the things that make my spirit sing. There are TCKs from Nepal whose pulse accelerates in delight at the cacophony of hundreds of car horns blaring at the same time. Others from Norway who thrill, for reasons foreign to me, at the mere thought of biting into rackfisk. And yet others for whom the aroma of cinnamon and saffron takes them right back to the fragrant spice bazaar in Istanbul, Turkey. Yet, what embeds itself in global nomads from the places we've called home goes far beyond the sensory pleasures of sound, savor, and smell. We can also absorb traces of that culture's hierarchical structures, values, and outlook. During our spongy, formative years, global nomads will fold subtle data points into our thinking, behavior, and beliefs without even realizing we are. They'll become evident in our different attitudes about language, faith, friendship, and customs, or in our views on subjects like modesty, morality, theology, gender roles, and authority. I've seen this cause friction in families where red and blue bead parents had articulated clear values and belief systems that still became blurred when incorporated into their children's complex purple. The parents expected a certain amount of cultural leaching, but didn't anticipate the way it would affect deeper levels of philosophy and worldview. Subtle messaging about important concepts can wiggle its way under a TCK's conscious processing and anchor itself as an influential force. In grade school, I learned, without questioning the rightness or wrongness of it, that adults in authority were usually harmful. I had teachers who would pull my ear until it bled, pinch a nerve in my shoulder until my arm went numb, or plop a dunce cap onto my head, a hat with fake donkey ears extending from it, and then instruct my friends to make fun of me. The unspoken educational theory behind what I now view as abusive practices was that pain and fear would make me a better student. And since the same motivational techniques were inflicted on all of us, I figured it was normal, so I never told my parents. From my years in French classrooms, I also learned that cheating wasn't wrong. Everyone did it, and teachers seemed to appreciate the subversive creativity that fueled it. Cheating, it seemed, was only wrong if you got caught, and that wasn't because the practice was morally questionable, but because you were too dumb to perfect your technique. The best cheaters had a certain classroom prestige, a social standing we rule-abiders would never achieve. So when I began attending boarding school in Germany at age 13 and tried to enhance my luster among my peers by cheating on a Bible test and telling my new MK friends about it, I didn't expect to find myself sitting in Principal Neudorf's office minutes later. I learned that day that one country's moral standards are not necessarily universal, and that cheating is not always viewed as an admirable skill. When President Mitterrand died and his funeral was covered on national TV, I learned that it was acceptable for a man of power and wealth to be unfaithful to his wife. After all, when the cameras panned across the front pews on either side of Notre Dame's nave, there was no outrage at the sight of his wife and sons on one side and his mistress and their daughter together on the other. You might wonder why I didn't question any of the information I was collecting in my growing up years in my beloved France. The answer is simple. Developing children whose everyday lives straddle cultural divides will not have the discerning lens of red and blue-bead adults living under the same circumstances. Those adults will run what they observe and experience through an internal grid of well-defined systems and norms, accepting elements that fit their values and opinions and discarding those that do not. That well-calibrated lens may not be present in third culture kids. Their upbringing has been so multifocal that they lack their parents' single worldview clarity. This complicates their ability to select what they do or don't absorb into their developmental purple. They tend to just take it all in, and often don't realize the dissonance of some of their views, morality, or beliefs until they crash head-on into the expectations of families and communities. Peter had just arrived at Black Forest Academy, the TCK school in Germany where I taught for 20 years. Every day, he'd find something he disagreed with in the lesson I was teaching. He'd raise his hand and challenge our textbook's facts and conclusions, or not so diplomatically imply that I didn't know what I was talking about. It took me 2 weeks to realize that trying to discipline him for his pushback wasn't working. When I finally took the time to sit down across from Peter and have a conversation with him about his classroom behavior, I discovered that what he was doing was exactly what the teachers in his former educational system expected their best students to do. In the Spanish school he'd come from, challenging the teacher had ensured respect and good grades. Peter was applying to his education at BFA a winning behavior he'd learned in his passport culture, but he hadn't realized until our conversation that what works in one place may not work in another. Nor did he grasp how his arguing had been negatively labeled by teachers and peers because his purpleness lacked the clarity to be able to assess and adjust as he skipped from one planet to another. In the home, this tension can be felt even more keenly. I've seen it so often. The discomfort and dismay of moms and dads who don't understand the purple people living under their roof can so easily lead to conflict. This does not represent our family's values. Or, how can you think this behavior is okay? If parents have an understanding of the unguarded sponginess of children spending their formative years in more than one culture, they might be able to trade outrage for curious questions and open, thoughtful conversations in which the family's foundational philosophy can be re-articulated and reaffirmed. Just as importantly, those conversations might help the MKs themselves to become aware of their propensity to absorb without evaluating. This realization, in turn, can empower them with agency, the ability to consider the messaging they're receiving from external influences, to filter it through conscious assessment metrics, and to decide, based on that, what they'll embrace and what they'll let go before it all gets more permanently embedded in their beautiful, complicated Play-Doh. This is why I encourage those who love and serve MKs to ask questions when they see them doing things differently or sometimes shockingly. Figure out if this was normal in the worlds they've absorbed into their purple before coming to conclusions about their character. They're not 100% from anywhere, after all. They're elf without the furry costume. They're elf without the pointy shoes. Thank you so much for listening in today, friends. Make sure you check the show notes for all the links I mentioned earlier, and please share these resources with any friends or churches or relatives who might benefit from them. And remember that you can go back and catch earlier chapters on this podcast or on YouTube. Don't forget to check back in 2 weeks for a heartfelt and rousing conversation with an adult MK who is absolutely a force of nature. As I release this episode into the world today, I want you to know that I celebrate the purple you are or the purple you love. Thank you for listening.